Hey everyone, Wydeck welcoming you to Game 1 of a Best of 3 series from the Zotac Cup number 187 in semi-final action play. And this time on Frost, we've got spawning in the bottom left as the red zerg representing Team Acer. We've got Scarlett. Scarlett is a very good player from Canada, and her opponent will be spawning in the top left. As the blue zerg, formerly of Team Evil Geniuses, currently teamless, we have Revival. So in this matchup, we're going to see some very, very good ZVC action. I'm completely confident of that. Both players are very high caliber players. And this time on Frost is going to open up a few interesting options, as Frost is a 4-player map, but it looks like both players are going to be able to guess correctly immediately, 50-50 chance. I guess it's going to be 1 in 4 chance that both players are going to be able to scout each other immediately, as the Overlords are going to be able to spot each other basically right at the middle point of the two bases. So they're going to be able to see each other. They know exactly where they've spawned. And there are a lot of options in ZVC. One player can go for a Baneling bus, maybe an early hatchery to get that economic power. So a lot of options in ZVZ. And here on Frost, because it is a larger map, there are some other interesting options as well. And another thing that is interesting is that creep spread, though beneficial, more beneficial for you, can also benefit your opponent, depending on the play style. Because Zerg units can't tell what creep they're sitting on. So if they're sitting on any creep, either their own or the opponent's creep, they are faster. So that is something to keep in mind of. Now on Frost, this base, potentially a third base, 4 players, is kind of difficult to defend against air units because there's a large chasm here. So if you bring Hydralisk or Spore Crawlers, for example, here, air units can easily dart away and you can't really deal with them effectively. So that is something we have to look out for if this game is going to go into a more prolonged state. We do have 2 Xel'Naga towers in the middle of the map, but because they've spawned so close to each other, neither of these Xel'Naga towers are going to be very useful, as basically to go from one base to the other is basically just kind of a straight line, a little bit of a turn. So these Xel'Naga towers are not going to be that useful. They won't be useless, but obviously if they were in cross-spawn locations, these Xel'Naga towers would play much more of a crucial role in the outcome of this game. Now it looks like both players have their spawning pools up. Both players have 1 extractor. So maybe the mad dash to 100 gas. Now it looks like Revival was going for more than 100 gas, so it looks like he just missed it for a second. So he will be going for Zergling speed as well as Scarlett. So both players are opting for that early Zergling speed for map control. It can be very dangerous if you don't go for Zergling speed and then your opponent does, because then the Zerglings can totally outrun your Zerglings, and then they can create quite a bit of havoc in your base, finishing off drones and surrounding queens and the such. So both players opting for that Zergling speed. We are going to see a Baneling's Nest. So I guess this is going to be the first diversion between the 2 build orders for between Revival, and Scarlett. And that Baneling's Nest can be very, very potent, especially if Revival does not scout it. Now, it's very interesting. A lot of Zerg players like to put their Baneling's Nest at the natural because the Overlord is not there. So they will not get scouted. And it looks like Revival is going to be going for that Baneling's Nest as well. And he's building 20 Zerglings currently. That's a lot of Zerglings. So Revival is going really heavy deep into Zerglings. Scarlett is detecting something. Actually, they're both building Spine Crawlers, so nothing out of the ordinary yet. It looks like Zergling speed is finished for Revival, just slightly ahead of Scarlett, and able to spot that Baneling's Nest, I believe. Yes, able to confirm the position of that Baneling's Nest. Now, Scarlett is not sure about Revival's Baneling's Nest. We have a lot of Zerglings coming in here, probably about 20, doing some damage to these drones. It looks like half of it will be split up, or a quarter will be dealt with at the natural, and 3/4 will be at that main base. But we do have Banelings scuttling around here, looking for some connections, and those Banelings can wreak havoc on those Zerglings. We have 3 Baneling eggs at the right side of the main base of Scarlett. Scarlett able to get a detonation, able to kill quite a few Zerglings. There's quite a few Zerglings left still. And Scarlett has to be really careful here, because if those Banelings explode very close to the drones, a lot of damage could be done. One Baneling does go down. The second one goes down as well. The third does catch a few more Zerglings. But those Baneling bombs were not very successful in damaging the economy of Scarlett. If we take a look at this, only 1 drone lost, so not that effective. And resources lost is actually in favor of Scarlett. So even though Revival was being very aggressive, the detonations of those Banelings was not very successful. And it looks like Scarlett is going to go for a brief counterattack, setting in some Zerglings. But there's so many Banelings and Zerglings in this force. Scarlett is going to think better of it and retreats back to her base. Now, Scarlett is going to be going for that Spire. Revival does not have any anti-air, but he's going for a Spire of his own. So both players are basically identical. So very interesting builds because they are the same. It's just going to be down to execution and a few seconds here and there. Now, Scarlett is scouting around with her Overseer, trying to see what is going on in Revival's base. Now, one little difference is Revival doesn't actually have any creep tumors. Scarlett does have 1. So Scarlett will have a slightly more creep spread than her opponent. And it looks like we will have the timing of that third hatchery at virtually the same time as well between the 2 players. So they are almost neck and neck and almost identical. This doesn't happen all the time, but once in a while it will. Now Scarlett does have 2 Banelings heading to that natural base. It looks like Scarlett will be pulling them back currently. Zerglings are trying to pick away at that Baneling. Now remember, once they pick away at that Baneling, Zerglings will explode. And now this last Baneling from Scarlett is going to explode as well, doing some damage to another Baneling from Revival. And this is really difficult. I think this is the most difficult part of StarCraft. Trying to micro Zerglings to attack Banelings is very, very difficult. But both players are transitioning into mutas. We have 7 mutas on the way for Scarlett, 7 mutas on the way for Revival. It looks like both players are playing the mirror match. And Scarlett has to be careful here. One of her queens is actually completely surrounded, and it will get picked off by a whole bunch of Zerglings. Zerglings are taking a lot of damage. We have Zergling on Zergling action at that potential third base. It's not finished yet. Mutas are going to rush in here to clean up some of the Zerglings, and finally going to target down this Overlord as well. But these Mutalisks have to be careful because Revival has Mutalisks of his own just hanging out at that natural. We have +1 Zerg Air Carapace being researched by both players as well, so the upgrade advantage is not going to go to either player. And we do actually have a Spore Crawler on the way for Scarlett. We have a Spine Crawler actually for Revival, so no static anti-air defenses. And it looks like the Mutalisks from Scarlett are going to come in here, focus down on some free Overlords, and then now the Mutalisks are going to dart away. That's exactly what Mutalisks are for, to come in here for hit-and-run attacks. And that's exactly what they're doing. Able to pick off another Overlord for free. And now focusing down on some drones. At the same time, Scarlett is creating some havoc at that third base. The Mutalisks were pulled away. So Scarlett was able to get some free drone kills. 11 now. That's quite substantial in my opinion. So Scarlett, I really think, came out ahead in that encounter and has built a small 15 supply advantage over her blue Zerg opponent. Now, Revival is going to come in here, but I don't think that's very wise. We have a Spore Crawler here as well. Spore Crawler able to take down 1 Mutalisk in 3 shots. That's why it's not very wise to engage against Spore Crawlers. The Mutalisks are getting transfused by Scarlett, and now Revival has to retreat. And Scarlett has now built a 15 supply advantage over Revival. Revival is trying to focus it down on some free Overlords. Unfortunately, not able to feast on that Overlord as of yet. Both players on 3 bases, and the mad dash to get more Mutalisks and +1 air attack upgrades are on the way for both players. So it looks like we are going to see some Mutalisks on Mutalisk action. Now, if either player opts to get Infestors and Fungal Growth, it can really change the complexity of the game. But neither player has really opted for that. Scarlett, at the same time, is actually sending a stealth elite hit squad of a whole bunch of Zerglings over that third base with only 1 Spine Crawler. Now, that Spine Crawler was able to see a lot of Zerglings, and that's going to pull the Mutalisks over to the third. I think this is a little bit of a bait and switch by Scarlett. And with only 1 Spore Crawler here, that is not going to work out against those Mutalisks. But it looks like Scarlett is going to retreat with those Mutalisks for now. And Revival is playing very defensive right now. Scarlett is being very aggressive. All the action is happening near Revival's hatcheries, and now it looks like the bait and switch may be complete. The Overlord does go down. The Spinecrawler cannot hit Mutalisk, but it looks like Scarlett is going to retreat with those Mutalisks for the time being. Is she going to come back in for a flyby? One Mutalisk is picked off by Revival, and Scarlett has built almost a 50 supply advantage over Revival. At the same time, it looks like we got a whole bunch of Zerglings at that main base at the second as well. So the bait and switch has finally been effective, and now it looks like we are going to get some Mutalisk on Mutalisk action. Revival actually leading some of his Mutalisk to death. Oh, very wise move by Scarlett, just constantly baiting Revival back and forth, sending the Zerglings here, then forcing Revival to send his Mutalisk and Zerglings here, and then sending the Mutalisk here, and then pulling Revival back to the natural, and then finally switching between the bases again, sending the Mutalisk once again to the third base, and then sending the Zerglings to the main and the natural, and constantly just switching it up really gave Revival a lot of headaches. And that's the advantage of Zerg. I mean, the Zerglings are fast, the Mutalisks are fast, and just able to really convincingly put down Revival 1-0 in this best of 3. We'll have to head over to Game 2 to see if Revival can even up the series or if Scarlett will move on to the final.